You're watching News 24 Live. It's Monday, the 23rd of November. We've got our sports analyst, editor Garen Lamley, and chief writer Rob Howing from Sport 24 in studio to give us a recap of some of the weekend sporting events and some big sport talking points from the past week. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming in.
Morning, Nick.
Hello, Nick.
And I guess it feels, well, after last week, like a bit of a rugby hangover, Rob, with all this Eddie Jones drama, so that we can now confirm and put to bed he's gone. But apparently also dropping the Stormers potentially for a second time because he's kind of committed to doing a sort of technical advisor stuff ahead of the next season Super Rugby, and he's not going to do that either.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a further blow. It almost just indicates how sort of out of control the whole thing came from a Western Province rugby point of view, and how really, all of the financial clout that the English offered made the critical difference in the end. Western Province went to great pains to put out that video showing that they'd recorded of Eddie Jones, full of contrition and apologies for not being able to make it.
Emotional music in the background.
Absolutely, saying what a marvellous opportunity it had been, how he'd loved being near the tabletop mountain, as he called it, and we then learnt that he was so sort of taken by his short time here that he was going to return free of charge, basically, for a little spell, helping to get pre-season cards in order. And it now turns out that he's come out with a completely different statement in England, saying that he has no intention of coming back to South Africa, is simply going back to Japan to sort of pack up a few belongings there, pack some warm clothes, collect his wife, and travel across, to the Northern Hemisphere. So really, it looks like a full goodbye to the short-lived tenure of Eddie Jones. And the Stormers, of course, left with that big sort of vacancy, that big question mark about the head coaching berth. Only a few weeks now before they really get down to the nitty-gritty of preparation for the new Super Rugby season.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you guys. We've heard reports of John Mitchell being one of the front runners to take over the Stormers. Garen, I know you're a betting man. Who's your money on?
It seems like the smart money is on John Mitchell, which in some ways is a little bit surprising. He was apparently interviewed, back in June. Back then, he was a bit concerned the fact that Director of Rugby Getsmal was only, in his post for another 2 years. He wanted a 4-year contract, John Mitchell. So, he had a few things to say about the structures at in the Western Cape. So, it looked like he was ruled out. Then they obviously hired Eddie Jones, but now with him gone, it seems like Mitchell's back as flavour of the month. I mean, he must know that he was second best, at best. So, he looks like the front runner. He's been out of coaching for a while now. He has coached the Western Force and the Lions, with respect to both those teams.
All Blacks.
and the All Blacks. So, he has got a track record of coaching at the highest level, certainly at Super Rugby level. Getsmal did talk about wanting a coach with 6 to 7 years of Super Rugby experience, plus international experience, and the only person that sort of ticked any of those boxes was John Mitchell. It was a very surprising statement by Getsmal because even Eddie Jones doesn't have that much experience. So I'm not sure what all that meant, but it looks like John Mitchell. Obviously we've seen him on TV. He's very analytical, speaks at a very, very high level. I'm not sure if how the players will respond to that. There's talk about him being an incredible disciplinarian. Really insisting that the players are fit and pushing them.
Sort of like Cam Staldrat's tendencies.
A little bit, hopefully not that far. But I'm not sure how that sort of will go down in the Western Cape. I've got a very young team these days, a couple of new faces in the Cape. So it'll be interesting to see. If it's not John Mitchell, I wouldn't be surprised if Getsmal just, I think he's sort of taking over as an interim coach. As director of rugby, it's a very confusing title because we look at the Sharks and their director of rugby, Gary Gold, is effectively the Sharks coach. But in the Western Cape, Director Rugby Getsmal is not the coach. So he might just help out now in preparing the team December, January, before the season kicks off, and he might be enjoying the job. The players might be responding to him, and he might just carry on. And for all we know, he leads the Stormers to the conference title in a very confusing Super Rugby layout and structure and format. But he might just carry on as the coach, and then that obviously saves 3 million, 5 million, whatever it is per year that they have to pay, a top class international coach. But that's obviously has to be decided fairly soon. It's not long now until Super Rugby kicks off, so we'll need some finality on who actually will be leading the Stormers in next year's tournament.
Rob, what kind of coach would John Mitchell then be for the Stormers? Obviously, with Eddie Jones coming in, he sort of promised to shake things up and you know, provide a more sort of attacking brand of rugby. Obviously, John Mitchell does seem like a bit more of a technical coach. I mean, what kind of brand of rugby could we expect in the Cape then?
I think, look, obviously John Mitchell also comes from a forward sort of pedigree himself, so that doesn't automatically suggest that he's going to sort of revitalise sort of backline play and try scoring potential, but that wouldn't be strictly true, because you know, for one thing, he's a New Zealander, which in itself would be a mighty relief to a lot of South Africans who, you know, I mean, a lot of the world applauds the sort of foresight that the whole New Zealand philosophy, you know, whether past or present, immediate past or present, is all revolved around really constructive play, trying to actually score tries. And I think Mitchell has proved that he knows how to you know, produce a sort of a genuine sort of 15-man brand of rugby, and that he won't be sort of forward obsessed. He will want a big, strong, sturdy, muscular pack, make no mistake. That's very much ingrained in his mindset. But he's also shown before that, you know, he's also considered the sort of he was the precursor to the Lions kind of evolution, which involved a lot of sparkling backline play as well, and sort of linking loose forwards and so on. And Johan Ackermann has sort of inherited Mitchell's mantle and taken it on, obviously very impressively himself, but a lot of credit still being given to Mitchell for the way he kind of set the structure in place for the Lions to produce quite a thrilling brand of rugby, and possibly to be the most sort of you know, far-sighted sort of South African franchise, if you like, in Currie Cup and maybe even in Super Rugby of late. So I wouldn't write off Mitchell's ability to create a good sort of attacking template. The other big sort of issue has been, as you say, that issue of sort of staunch disciplinarian and so on, which didn't always find favour. And I've heard Corne Krige already expressing some reservations about the fact that, you know, we do things in a more laid-back way at the coast. The Sharks and the Stormers have a more laid-back sort of philosophy on things. But Mitchell has also acknowledged some of his failings in the past. You know, he's sort of big enough and old enough to sort of admit to prior errors in his ways, and he might actually have a slightly more sort of compassionate side now, if you like, than might have been imagined a few years ago. So I'd be
He seems to have really
excited.
embraced the South African rugby culture, and I mean, he's really settled down here. He's got a business going in KZN. So I mean,
I mean, his just by being a SuperSport pundit, it helps. We know that he watches a hell of a lot of South African rugby. That's no bad thing. I think, given the vacancy created, John Mitchell filling it would be no bad thing for the Stormers and for South African rugby.
Great. Another big bit of rugby news was the Springboks title sponsor pulling out. What can we read into that?
Yeah, it was quite surprising news. You know, ABSA, obviously the name on the Springbok jersey for the last couple of years now, they were also title sponsors of the Currie Cup. We knew that they weren't renewing that for next season, but the news that they're no longer going to be the Springbok sponsor was a bit of a shock. You know, we've obviously had Castle, we've had Sasol, so now we've got ABSA, now we're looking for somebody else. So if you've got any of those jerseys, they're all out of date now, unfortunately. So, you know, it's very interesting. You know, you're obviously looking for these big international sponsors for a national team like the Stormers. You know, any sponsor would get tremendous publicity, you know, at the top level, Rugby World Cups. You've got very prominently across your jersey, you know, the title sponsor. There was talk about Barclays, with the link between ABSA and Barclays being on the jersey when the Springboks played away. That obviously has fallen through as well. I'm not sure what the problem was, that SARU and ABSA couldn't, you know, come to any sort of agreement. Yeah. But now, you know, it's a bit of a rush to find a new title sponsor. Luckily for SARU, I guess, you know, the Springboks aren't going to be playing until June next year, so they've got some time to land a new sponsor. It's going to be, you know, obviously a big deal, many millions, in the tens of millions, I'm sure. Hopefully over a fairly lengthy time.
What about like the SS7's team? I mean, they
absolutely. Yeah, you know, they also, you know, the ABSA sponsorship, I think it goes to sevens and probably under 20s as well. So it's on all the national jerseys. You know, I've got ASICS as the apparel sponsor. They, I believe, signed up until 2019, the next Rugby World Cup. So I think SARU will be looking for at least a 4-year deal with whoever is the next sponsor. But you know, it's a little bit worrying. You know, you'd like your you'd think that any sponsor would be, you know, would enjoy the fact that they've got all this exposure on such a prominent team in world sport. But obviously something went wrong with the negotiations. I'm not too sure. There was talk about transformation issues being behind it, perhaps. Again, you know, you don't want to speculate wildly about that because it might well not be the case. But it seems like, you know, they fell foul of each other, and we're looking for a new sponsor.